And the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here to speak under the auspices of the American Constitution Society, which I greatly admire and whose presence I welcome, and who one of the people I most admired and worked with in government was one of the founders, retired Judge Abner Mikva, who actually did great service as a member of Congress, as a member of the executive branch, and then on the appellate court and in Washington. So I'm very pleased to be here. I will talk for a little while and throw this open just to get the basics out. I am the lead sponsor, along with Congressman Ron Paul of Texas and some other Democrats and Republicans, of two pieces of legislation. One would get rid of the federal prohibition where medical marijuana is allowed, and that's one we did for a couple of years. And then this past year we did the broader one, which would be to remove all federal criminal penalties for the possession and personal use, for the personal use of marijuana and the possession of amounts for personal use. We are in a complicated federal-state area here. Let me begin on the medical marijuana. I have to say that there have been some recent discouraging developments from my standpoint on behalf of the Obama administration. The Clinton administration was very good. We have, as many of you know, this conflict situation where a number of states have voted to allow people to use marijuana if it is medically prescribed. In most of the states, and all but about one, that happened by referendum. One of the things I want to make as an important point is I have had people tell me they thought it was very brave of me to do this. Not so much. I believe there are two issues in America today where the voters are more enlightened than the elected officials. I don't think that's always the case. Too many of my friends on the left assume that wisdom always resides in the voters until they disagree with the voters, and they got a problem describing why not. But there are two areas where the public is clearly ahead of the politicians: legalizing marijuana and reducing military spending. I'm going to talk only about the marijuana one today. But we have a situation where the Clinton administration did the right thing and essentially said they would not prosecute people in those states where medical marijuana was permissible if they were getting it prescribed to them, and they weren't going to prosecute the people who were making it available. The Bush administration went into prosecution of this. There was then a federal lawsuit, which was kind of interesting because the usual ideological sides got somewhat reversed. The question was a states' rights issue. And actually some of the conservatives voted with the states. The states' rights position at that point was to allow state medical marijuana laws to, in effect, overcome the federal statute. The federal supremacy clause on the other side. The liberal justices, on the whole, upheld the federal statute. They have been misinterpreted by some who have said, see, even these liberals think marijuana should be illegal. They thought no such thing. They did think that in America, in our constitutional system, under the supremacy clause, even a state referendum can't beat a federal statute. But just because the federal government can prosecute constitutionally people who use medical marijuana in accordance with state law doesn't mean that they have to or even that they should. Bush began to prosecute, and it was in the defense against one of those prosecutions that the Supreme Court upheld this. The Obama administration initially moved back from the prosecution, but recently they have moved more towards it, and I am very distressed by this. In fact, I mean to ask Attorney General Holder, is there any legal way for someone in the state where medical marijuana is allowed to receive the medical marijuana? I'm not clear under the Obama administration's approach that it is. And there was a recent effort again by some U.S. attorneys to go after people. And they're arguing, well, some people aren't really sick. They're just using marijuana because they want to use it. And my position on that is, I understand what the law is, but my position on that is, yeah, that's right. If they want to use it, why Do we make it a crime for them to use it? So we went beyond the statute. We have both bills out there. One, again, which allows people in states which prescribe medical marijuana which allow the prescription medical marijuana to use it. But then we decided finally, let's just deal with this whole thing. So we have a law in the hopper that says there should be no federal criminal penalty, or no federal penalty, no civil penalty, no treble damages for smoking a joint, no penalties for the personal use of marijuana. And my colleagues are afraid of it, unfortunately. I think the public is ready for it. It is, after all, a federal repeal. If the law passed tomorrow, the non-medical use of marijuana would still be illegal almost everywhere in America. There are a couple of places, Massachusetts one, Maine another, where it's a civil fine. In other cases, New York has this very odd situation, exacerbated by disastrous policy by the Bloomberg administration, in which apparently it is illegal to display marijuana in public. So the police engage in the practice of stopping mostly minority young men, demanding that they empty their pockets, and when they did so, not having the legal understanding of why they didn't have to, they were then prosecuted for showing marijuana in public. That is, people walking around with marijuana in their pockets, which was not illegal, have been ordered by the police in New York to empty their pockets and therefore be illegal. Now, I'm told the Bloomberg administration has finally stopped doing that. I mention that because one of the arguments we get is, what are you worrying about this for? Nobody enforces it. The argument nobody enforces it usually comes from older white people, because it is true, nobody enforces it against them. I had this debate with Jay Leno, who said, no, look, it's all right. Hey, if you want to use it, nobody gives you a hassle, but it's better not to make it legal. Well, apparently nobody has given Jay Leno a hassle if he uses it. But there were, apparently last year, 50,000 marijuana possession arrests in New York City. Now, the mayor says, well, that's a good way to go after people. It cuts the murder rate. I mean, it leads to this nonsense. Even if it were a good way to do it, the notion that you can justify arresting a whole lot of people for something for which you shouldn't arrest them, because some very small percentage of them might otherwise have done something wrong, is antithetical to any notion of justice that anybody in America ought to want to profess. But that's where we are. It is still, politically, people are afraid of it. In practice, they shouldn't be. As I said, Ron Paul is an advocate of making marijuana legal. It hasn't stopped him from being very popular with a large number of Republicans, although I will tell you, he and I have also been in agreement on a couple of other issues. We would like to remove the prohibition on internet gambling and substantially reduce the military. And I approached him a couple of months ago and said I wanted to do another initiative to publicize one of the things we're doing. And he said to me, half seriously, I think I got to wait on that. My people tell me you're killing me in Iowa. So apparently I'm not that much of an asset in the Iowa caucuses. But that's essentially where we are. Now, let me deal with some of the arguments.